One of the most important skills you can ever develop is the art of conversation. This is about more than just talking. It's about connecting, influencing, and building relationships that truly matter. Let's begin with a simple truth. Conversation is a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned, honed, and mastered. Think about it. Every relationship, every opportunity, every success you will ever achieve is tied in some way to your ability to communicate. Whether you're navigating business, enriching your personal life, or chasing a dream, your ability to converse with others is key. To be a great conversationalist, you must be more interested in others than you are in making others interested in you. This might seem counterintuitive. We're often told that if we want to impress, we have to be interesting, right? But here's the secret. The most interesting people are those who are genuinely interested in others. When you focus on the person you're talking to, when you really listen, ask questions, and show genuine curiosity, you create a connection that goes far beyond surface-level chatter. Consider this. How often do we find ourselves in conversations where we're simply waiting for our turn to speak? We're so focused on what we want to say next that we miss the chance to truly engage with the person in front of us. If you want to master the art of conversation, you must shift your focus. Become deeply interested in the person you're talking to. Be curious about their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences. I'll share a story from my own life. Early in my career, I had the privilege of working with some of the most successful people in business. One thing that stood out to me was how they approached conversations. They were always deeply engaged, always asking questions, always seeking to understand the other person. They weren't just making small talk. They were building relationships, one conversation at a time. Let's talk about listening. Listening is more than just hearing words. It's about understanding, empathizing, and responding thoughtfully. Most people listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. But here's what separates great conversationalists from the rest. They listen with full attention and an open mind. They listen, not just to respond, but to truly understand what the other person is saying. There's a concept I often refer to as active listening. It involves fully engaging with the speaker, nodding, making eye contact, and giving verbal affirmations like "I see" or "That's interesting." But it goes beyond just these physical signs of listening. Active listening means asking follow-up questions that show you've been paying attention. It's about diving deeper into the conversation, showing that you're not just listening to respond, but to learn. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're in a conversation and the other person mentions they've just returned from a trip to Japan. Instead of saying, "Oh, that's nice," and moving on, you could say, "Japan? That sounds fascinating. What was the highlight of your trip?" Or even better, "I've always been curious about Japanese culture. What did you find most surprising?" This type of engagement shows that you're not just hearing the words they're saying, but you're interested in their experience. Here's a personal anecdote. I once had a conversation with a gentleman who was an expert in a field I knew little about. Instead of trying to steer the conversation to something I was more familiar with, I decided to dive into his world. I asked questions, I listened, I learned. By the end of the conversation, not only had I gained a wealth of new knowledge, but I had also formed a genuine connection with someone who appreciated my interest in his expertise. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and seeing the world through their eyes. When you bring empathy into a conversation, you create a space where the other person feels heard, valued, and understood. Why is this important? Because people are drawn to those who make them feel good about themselves. When you show empathy in a conversation, you're telling the other person, "I care about how you feel. Your thoughts and experiences matter to me." This builds trust, deepens connections, and opens the door to more meaningful and productive conversations. Empathy doesn't mean you have to agree with everything the other person says, but it does mean you acknowledge their perspective. For instance, if someone is sharing a challenge they're facing, instead of immediately offering advice, you might say, "That sounds really tough. I can see why you're feeling that way." Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply acknowledge what the other person is going through. In my own experience, I found that conversations where empathy is present tend to be the most rewarding. I remember a time when a colleague was going through a difficult period. Instead of jumping in with solutions, I took the time to listen and understand how he was feeling. That conversation not only strengthened our relationship, but also helped him find clarity on his own terms. Next, let's explore the art of asking questions. Questions are the lifeblood of a good conversation. They open doors, uncover insights, and keep the dialogue flowing. But it's not just about asking any questions. It's about asking the right questions. There are different types of questions you can ask in a conversation. Open-ended questions are particularly powerful because they encourage the other person to elaborate, to share more about themselves. Instead of asking, "Did you have a good day?" you might ask, "What was the best part of your day?" Instead of, "Do you like your job?" try, "What do you enjoy most about what you do?" The goal is to ask questions that invite the other person to think, reflect, and share more deeply. This not only makes the conversation more engaging, but also allows you to learn more about the person you're talking to. But remember, it's not just about the questions you ask, it's also about how you ask them. Your tone, your body language, your level of interest all play a role in how the other person perceives your questions. Ask with genuine curiosity, and you'll find that people are more willing to open up and share. Here's another story. I once had the opportunity to meet a very successful entrepreneur. Instead of asking the usual questions about business and success, I asked him about his passions, his motivations, and the lessons he'd learned along the way. The conversation that followed was one of the most insightful and enriching I've ever had. All because I asked the right questions. A great conversation is like a dance, a balance of speaking and listening. It's important to share your thoughts, your experiences, and your insights, but it's equally important to make space for the other person to do the same. Too often, conversations become one-sided, with one person dominating the discussion. This can leave the other person feeling unheard and disengaged. The key is to find that balance, to share just enough to keep the conversation interesting, but not so much that you overshadow the other person. One way to achieve this balance is by practicing the 50-50 rule. This means aiming to spend about half of the conversation talking and the other half listening. Of course, this isn't a strict rule, but it's a good guideline to keep in mind. It ensures that both parties have a chance to contribute and feel valued in the conversation. But there's more to it than just dividing your time evenly. It's also about how you transition between speaking and listening. A smooth conversation flows naturally from one topic to the next, with each person building on what the other has said. This requires attentiveness, patience, and a willingness to let the conversation take its own course. I've found that some of the best conversations I've had are those where I've spoken less and listened more. When you give the other person the space to share, you often discover new perspectives, ideas, and insights that you might have missed otherwise. We can't talk about conversation without discussing body language. Your words are important, but your nonverbal cues, your posture, gestures, facial expressions, often speak louder than your words. Body language can either reinforce what you're saying or undermine it. Imagine telling someone you're interested in what they're saying, but you're constantly glancing at your watch or looking around the room. Your words say one thing, but your body language says something else entirely. To become a better conversationalist, you must become aware of your body language. Are you making eye contact? Are you facing the person you're talking to? Are your gestures open and welcoming? All these cues send a message to the other person about your level of engagement and interest. Here's a tip. Practice mirroring. Mirroring is when you subtly mimic the other person's body language. If they lean in, you lean in. If they're animated with their hands, you match that energy. This creates a sense of rapport and makes the other person feel more comfortable and connected with you. But it's not just about mirroring others. It's also about being mindful of your own body language. Pay attention to your posture, your facial expressions, and your gestures. Are they consistent with the message you want to convey? Are they helping or hindering the conversation? Now, let's talk about charisma. Charisma is that intangible quality that draws people to you, that makes them want to listen to what you have to say. While some people seem to be naturally charismatic, I've learned that charisma is something you can develop. Charisma comes from a place of confidence and authenticity. When you're confident in who you are and what you're saying, it shows. People are drawn to those who are comfortable in their own skin, who aren't trying too hard to impress, but are simply being themselves. But confidence alone isn't enough. Authenticity is equally important. People can sense when you're being genuine and when you're putting on a show. To develop charisma, you must be true to yourself. Speak from the heart, share your real thoughts and feelings, and be honest in your interactions. When people see that you're being authentic, they're more likely to trust and respect you. Charisma also involves a certain level of warmth and approachability. It's about making others feel comfortable around you, about creating a positive and inviting energy. This can be achieved through a warm smile, a friendly tone of voice, and a genuine interest in the other person. Let me share another story. I once met a man who had an incredible presence. He was confident, warm, and engaging. But what really stood out to me was his authenticity. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply being himself. And because of that, people were naturally drawn to him. They wanted to be around him, to listen to what he had to say. That's the power of charisma. Finally, let's touch on the importance of practice. Like any skill, becoming an expert conversationalist takes practice. You won't master it overnight, but with time and effort, you can improve. Start by practicing with those you're comfortable with. Friends, family, colleagues. Pay attention to how you're engaging with them. Are you truly listening? Are you asking thoughtful questions? Are you balancing speaking and listening? Are you using your body language effectively? As you practice, you'll start to notice what works and what doesn't. You'll become more aware of your own conversational habits and begin to make adjustments. And over time, you'll find that your conversations become more engaging, more meaningful, and more impactful. Remember, the goal isn't just to become a better talker. It's to become a better communicator. It's about creating connections, building relationships, and enriching your life and the lives of others through the power of conversation.